Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a continuation of a previous lesson from the 6th chapter in the book of Job. We made it all the way up until the 13th verse. We're going to take this from 14 all the way through. It's 30 verses long, but before we do that, we just need to briefly review the narrative context. The book of Job begins really with a dialogue between Yahweh and Satan, testament to his nature. He accuses Job, a servant to whom Yahweh points with pride and delight. Well, have you seen he's been scouring the earth, and he says, well, have you seen my servant Job? And he accuses Job of having a commercial conception of worship, and then he tempts Yahweh, saying, take away all this, the protective hedge you have around him, and he will curse you to your face. Yahweh consents to the challenge, and there's a difference I want to establish between testing and tempting. Temptation is the exclusive province of the adversary and the demons, and but Yahweh remains sovereign and supreme, so the adversary can only work at the behest. He can only go as far as Elohim, whose power is unlimited, will allow him to. But if you do give him an inch, he will take a mile. He takes everything from Job instantly in an instant. Raiders come and steal all his livestock, and his houses collapse on his own children. And then to add insult to injury, or injury to insult, he is inflicted with skin boils, painful skin boils, and this is all to compel. He wants to tempt Job to blaspheme, and 2 times in the first 2 chapters we read that he does not. Verse 121, he says, naked I came into the earth, naked I shall return. Yahweh giveth, Yahweh taketh away. Blessed be the name of Yahweh. And in 2:10 he says much the same thing after his wife asks him to curse Yahweh and die, and Job is very much in agreement with the latter, not so much with the former, and he reiterates that in the material we're going to cover before the material we're going to cover. But in the 11th verse of the 10th chapter, second chapter, we read of 3 comforters. The first at the top of the list is Eliphaz the Temanite, who we hear from in the 4th and 5th chapter. That's his response and rebuttal to Job, which, as we already mentioned, he would very much like to die, and that is the theme that's communicated earlier in this chapter when we'll review. But Eliphaz, so the 3rd chapter of Job can be summarized in a single sentence. It would be a death wish, single phrase rather. He longs to die. He wishes for the sweet release of death from the agony of life. And Eliphaz gets the dialogue in motion because it's a period of 7 days there, and to their where they sit in stunned silence. And to Eliphaz's credit, he does get the wheel in motion, and we finally witness Job incrementally try and make sense of it. He's ready to give up. He has no hope, no strength, nothing. He feels deprived. So Eliphaz in the 4th chapter, the first half is an observation, the latter half is a revelation. In the first half of the 5th chapter, it's an observation followed by a doxology. Then he gives 7 things, 7 signs that one is living in the path of righteousness. No evil thing shall befall you. There's a list of 7. Now we're going to review the material which takes place before the material we're going to cover. Job rebuttals to Eliphaz, and his response is shaped by Eliphaz's rebuttal to him. And he says in the 2nd verse, oh, that my grief were thoroughly weighed, and my calamity be placed on the scales, for it would outweigh the sand of the sea. Therefore my words have been rash. So he's asking for charity and allowance for his rash words, his death wish, because of the greatness of his grief, which is beyond measure, beyond description, and there's a disturbing lack of empathy from his so-called comforters. They offer counsel but not comfort. They cannot detach themselves from the narrow dogmatism of their archaic, simplistic theology, which insists that suffering is always the direct result of sin. But remember, God tempts us because he loves us. Satan tempts us because he does not. For the arrows of El Shaddai are within me, and my spirit drinks in their poison. The onslaughts of Eloha are arrayed against me. So he does think that there's a supernatural force. He has the wrong one. These are the arrows of the adversary sent at the behest and the providential permission of El Shaddai. That is name translating as God Almighty. We find it 31 times throughout the book of Job. But he doesn't know. None of them are privy. None of them have insight or premonition or even awareness of the heavenly dialogue which took place before their earthly dialogue. Verse 9, he resumes his death wish that it would please Eloha to crush me, loose his hands, and cut me off. So Job is not contemplating the act of suicide. He knows that would be wrong, but he's asking for the one who he thinks has sent him these judgments, these plagues, these pains, to just end it right here, have some mercy, just kill me, end my suffering, and then I will return to you. And then I would still have comfort, and I would rejoice in pain, though not spared, for I would have not hidden the words of the Sacred One. So Job retains fast to his integrity and his faith. He's just questioning and understandably perplexed at the situation. He knows that he did nothing wrong, nothing to deserve it, yet he feels that Yahweh, El Shaddai, is the one who's doing this against him. But he maintains his faith and his integrity, and he does not succumb to Satan's temptation to blaspheme him to his face. What strength do I have that I should wait, and what is my end that I should prolong my life? Is my strength the strength of stone? Is my flesh of bronze? Is not my help within me, and is my ability driven from me? So he feels completely and utterly weak and hopeless and helpless in his own self. He had the source of strength. He was walking in the hedge of Yahweh's protection and was rewarded for his righteousness hitherto this point. Then suddenly and inexplicably, everything he has, everyone he loves is taken away from him in a moment of time. The only one left surviving is his wife. So this marks the 14th verse lesson itself. To one afflicted, kindness, even the one forsaking the fear of El Shaddai. So he's pleading to his friends, and Eliphaz is the only one who has spoken thus far, but the prism of their theological worldview are somewhat identical. They say in Eliphaz's dialogue, he implies that the wind was sent because he had sinned in secret, and his blamelessness was a facade, an exterior, because he had some secret sin that he wouldn't confess and repent of, and until he did, he would not be restored whole. It's a little more complicated than that. He does not fully anticipate the mind of Yahweh as is revealed in the unfolding of this book, but he's accusing his friends of forsaking the fear of El Shaddai, something Eliphaz thus far has only done him. He insists that there's some glaring inconsistency that's not visible, not obvious to all, but it is the reason that he has been forsaken by El Shaddai. Job does feel forsaken, but he accuses them of forsaking their covenant to fear the Almighty. My brothers are as undependable as a wadi in a bed which stream once ran. So he calls his friends, his comforters, his brothers. That is almost sarcastic term of deference because, they are completely undependable. The comfort that he offers him has no empathy. So he's saying, to one afflicted, show some kindness, show some understanding, at least try to empathize what I'm going through rather than why I am going through it. Do not impose your own answers without evidence. As the truth is, none of them know the answer to why. It is only with hindsight that the reader knows that it is a temptation, a testing sent from divinity, and a temptation from the devil. And a bed on streams which once ran, which are dark because of the ice in which the snow is hidden. When it is warm, they cease to flow. When it is hot, they vanish from their place. So he's accusing, he has the fair weather and foul weather faith. He is still maintaining his innocence and his faith and integrity in his confession of Yahweh, even though he feels that he has taken this all away from him. But Job has the fair weather faith. He was faithful and obedient in prosperity, and he had prospered mightily thus far as a reward for his reverence. But then he still retains his faith. He has the fair weather and the foul faith. The friends he accuses of being fair weather friends with these words. They were with him when he was good. Now that he's down and out, they are doing what they should not do as friends and brothers, which is to chide someone, accuse them without evidence. You don't know these things, so don't be saying these things, is essentially what he's saying. He's calling them fair weather friends. The paths of their way turn aside. They enter waste and perish. Passengers of Tema look expectantly. Travelers of Sheba wait for them. So Tema is not to be confused with Teman, which was the city from which Eliphaz hailed. Tema was some 350 miles from Jerusalem. These are not Israelite people. They are in the land and territory of Edom, or Esau is the founder of the Edomite nation, the brother of Jacob. And Sheba was, the kingdom of Sheba was located in the southwest corner of the Arabian Peninsula. It roughly corresponds with the modern country of Yemen. These are the people, the Sabaean raiders, who had taken one thing of his livestock. They gathered it all at once. And the Sheba is perhaps most familiar with Solomon's famous dialogue with the Queen of Sheba, who traveled a distance of some 1,000 miles to question the wisdom and find out for herself the rumors of the one she had heard. And the Savior uses her example to chide the Pharisees and the doubters and the naysayers of his generation. He's saying that the woman of the Queen of Sheba traveled all this way, and you have the living Messiah, one who is greater than Solomon, in your midst. So that just shows how privileged, yet they failed to make the most of that privilege. They were ashamed because they had trusted. Then they came and they were disappointed. So he's the they is not exactly clear, but shame, if your trust disappoints you, the shame is a natural reaction. It reflects poorly on the object of your trust, and it reflects poorly on you. You chose the wrong one. You do not have that element of discernment, and that inevitably leads to disappointment, because when friends, wives, spouses, or anyone else, bosses, are less than trustworthy, or employees, then that's going to disappoint the other party, the aggrieved party whom they have disappointed, by acting and being less than trustworthy. Trust is the cement which holds relationships together. Without trust and faith and belief, there's nothing, no chance, no possibility for even potentially fruitful relationships. Indeed, you have now become the same. You see downfall and are afraid. So he knows that deep down inside, they know that if it could happen to Job, it could happen to them. These were men who were on the exterior righteous and wise people, but there are some glaring inconsistencies in their wisdom. They are too simplistic, too archaic, too narrow, too dogmatic. But he's accusing them of being like the ones who traveled to and fro Tema and Sheba, so that's little over 600 miles. If we do the math from Jerusalem to there, it would have been roughly 600 miles. Still a great distance. And they know that Job is as equally as upstanding and upright as them. So they see a man who was so high brought so low, and they're afraid that it could happen to them, because it could happen to Job. It could happen to any of us, and Job's example survives as a lesson that came at great personal pain to him, but it is of great benefit to us. Did I ever say, give to me, or offer a bribe for me from your wealth? So he pleads his financial integrity. He never took what didn't belong to him. He never worked for what he never did not own what he did not work for. He did not steal. He did not cheat in business. He was prosperous precisely because he was honest. He had a reputation for honesty, and trust is bound to, you're going to invest in someone in commercial transactions if you trust in them. So trust, once more, is absolutely imperative for the entering and maintenance of that relationship. And, he never took, he was not seduced by other people's wealth. That is a temptation for many wealthy people. He sat as a judge in his city, we can imagine. So Job would have had some judicial pull, but he never accepted a bribe. He never took one. He resisted the temptation every time it came. Or rescue me from the hands of my enemies, or redeem me from the hands of oppressor. Job had not known defeat, certainly not to the magnitude he was now experienced, but it may be oversimplistically, and it's ultimately speculative, so we do not know. He may have experienced a trouble-free life almost. There's no such thing, but, he was rewarded in proportion to his righteousness, and he prospered financially, and he had a unshaking faith and devotion in the object of his worship and the object in his trust. So he had never been at the mercy of his enemies until now. Now he was at the mercy of the enemy, the adversary, who was the one who had inflicted this terrible pain and loss upon him in the effort and agenda to compel him to blaspheme Yahweh. So the Redeemer and Rescuer, this brings us to the 19th chapter. He anticipates, oh, I know my Redeemer liveth. That's a prelude to the resurrection. Teach me, and I shall be silent, and show me where I have gone astray. So he's speaking right now because he hasn't been taught anything by Eliphaz. He told him nothing new, nothing true. Well, there are some true things intermixed with his, but he's completely missing the mark in reference to Job, who he insists has gone astray, but Job is not convinced that he has. He knows he has not. He knows himself, and he knows his Yahweh, and he knows that he has done nothing to deserve it. So why is he being disciplined, as Eliphaz words it? He wasn't being disciplined. He was being tested, and I've established the difference between those in this lesson, some of its predecessors. Words of uprightness are harsh, but what does your reproving prove? So words of uprightness can be harsh. We have to, a friend and a father must be able and willing to tell their sons or children, respectively, the harsh, unpleasant truths of life. And sometimes you just have to be unsparing, not to the extreme, certainly, that Job's three comforters, erroneously named, were, but that's how they're identified in 2:11. What he's asking, what does your reproving prove? So you haven't proven that I am liable to any of your allegations. Your accusations have no basis in evidence, merit, or logic, or anything else, because I know I have not sinned in secret. I've maintained my faith and my integrity, the integrity of my faith until now, whether fair weather or foul weather, unlike you who are seemingly deserting me now that things suddenly become bad. So one of the lessons that is imparted through this is, when you're on top, everyone's your friend. When you're on bottom, you'll know who your friends are, your real friends. Do you reckon to reprove my words and the sayings of one in despair, which are as wind? So he's accusing his dialogue, his debate counterpart of treating his words lightly and just letting them go into the air, one out the other. Wind, it just travels to and fro. It doesn't stay in any location. It is not preserved in the memory. And, his reproof is unnecessary. So there are three standards we should observe and obey in reference to speaking the truth. Is it true, in reference to speak, is it true, is it kind, is it necessary? For instance, it may be true to tell a woman she looks fat in that dress, but we don't say that because that is unnecessarily harsh. She's trying to look beautiful, and she's just not beautiful, but we shouldn't take that away from her when she expresses her insecurity out loud. But Job's friends might have pictured Job as a fat lady in a dress asking, does this dress make me look fat? But they were not. They were in the spirit of condemnation, not restoration. They came to accuse, not to discover. You would cast lots over the fatherless and make merchandise of your friends. This is something Job did himself. He looked after the orphans, the fatherless, the ones who didn't have parental guidance. These are especially vulnerable, especially in the ancient world and still today. And he's accusing his antagonist of having the opposite outlook in reference to fatherless. Job, in his utter state of dejection and weakness, identifies with the fatherless. He knows what it's like to be sapped of strength. A child without a father is proven to be more violent than one who has this stable paternal influence. So this whole modern feminazi notion of toxic masculinity, the rhetoric does not match the reality. And he's just accusing him of selling out their friend and, just making merchandise. They're here to profit at his expense with their condemnations and accusations. Verse 28, but now please look at me, whether I would lie to your face. So he's asking them to look at him. Whenever someone tells you to look at them, that means they have something important to say. And there is some value in eye contact and conversation. And if you want to convince someone you're telling the truth and not lying, that's something you can say, look at me, and then make your convincing case. And there's something about the eyes which may or may not tell the truth of when someone looks into someone's eyes, that it's almost like a sixth sense of whether they are lying or telling the truth. So Job is maintaining his honesty and his integrity and his faith in spite of these human obstacles who are supplementing the suffering he is feeling as a natural cause and effect of the calamities which were inflicted upon him. Relent, please, and let there be no unrighteousness. Relent, my righteousness is still in it. So he's begging for mercy. He just says, relent, stop it, cut it out, please, please. He has manners, and he's saying that I have no unrighteousness. It is unrighteous of you to accuse me without accusation. So when we accuse other people with no sound basis, in fact, we are imitating the adversary who is the accuser, read of in Zechariah 3:1, and also somewhere in the 12th chapter in the book of Revelation. So that's, that is unrighteousness, but he insists that his righteousness is still in it. He did not deserve what was happening to him. There must be something wrong. And Yahweh eventually settles that question, but that's getting a little far ahead of ourselves. That's not until the 38th chapter. Is there unrighteousness on my tongue? Does my taste not discern what is perverse? So this is the 30th and final verse, and what he asks them is that, is he lying or telling the truth? He's telling them he did not sin in secret. He was walking uprightness with integrity and faith, and he was blameless in all his ways, and then suddenly something happened, which should ordinarily happen to no one in who is blameless. But and he says, do I still have the discernment of evil? I am experiencing evil. This was an evil inflicted upon Job, and evil is just anything that causes pain, hurt, shame, or sickness to anyone, and he knows what he's experiencing, but he doesn't know why he's experiencing. And it would especially help him to assess his situation if they lighten the load of their criticisms and not come with their predetermined answers. But Job continues the dialogue in the 7th chapter. We'll cover that soon. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to see you. Take care until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.